And you know, it's interesting because Kenny challenged you with the Rastafarian thing. And I wanted to let Kenny know. See, for me, the biggest part, well, makeup and body adornments should be used to accentuate a woman's natural beauty, not rewrite the shit completely. So, you know, um, my issue with wigs and swirls and lace fronts and all that extra stuff is not so much cultural appropriation, Kenny. It's more about self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And that self-esteem thing is the part that will kill a marriage. If that's what you know, that's the death by 1,000 cuts. And when you got somebody who doesn't like themselves to the point where they want to rewrite,
Mm-hmm.
remodel, recreate themselves,
Mm-hmm.
when they wipe all that shit off, they take everything off and they look completely different, or they're starkly different than who they were when they had it all on. That's the issue I think that most men are having. Not necessarily saying, well, you're trying to be like a white girl. I think you're just trying to be something that you're trying to be somebody completely different than who you actually are. And that's my issue that I have with the weaves and the extra and all this other kind of stuff. And I think that for by and large, that's what most men have an issue with women
I
when they
will
go
make an exception on this as far as the issues, and I'm glad you brought that up. To just give it more context and give it more uh, a better understanding with the wigs and the lace front and the lashes and all that stuff. I would say women who approach beauty from the top down angle, what they do is they focus on the hair, lashes, makeup, and all that shit. I would prefer women to focus on a bottom up approach, focus on their body, and then if they need to enhance their beauty with the makeup, all that, that makes sense. It's a lot of women that are, how do you call it? Uh, I forgot the terminology for it. I'm not even gonna go there because I can't think of it. But it's like,
Morbidly obese
huh?
is what that was you
It's
about to
like
say.
you wrapping up. You wrapping up. You wrap. I think this. I don't know if it is. It's like you putting you gift wrapping shit or some shit like that. It's pretty
Yeah.
on the outside, but
Yeah.
underneath it's ugly. So just focus on your fitness, your health, and I would argue that for all men, and y'all can challenge me or correct me, but I'm willing to go out on the record and say all of us would prefer black women would be in their healthy state, physically fit, over having wigs, lashes, makeup, and all that.
Absolutely.
I would rather deal with a woman who was physically toned and had the curves and was and what I'm saying, was beautiful as far as her physical aesthetics
Yeah.
versus having beautiful hair, beautiful lashes, beautiful makeup and lipstick and all that those other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bruiser, you're talking about hygiene. You're talking about hygiene, right? That's what you're
No.
talking about.
Well,
You
you could say
you say you
both.
prefer her to have better
Yes.
hygiene than, for, huh?
That's more
Hygiene.
so their lifestyle. But
Hygiene.
but
Oh,
I was
okay.
gonna say to that point, with what Kenny said about Rastafarianism, right? The women doing that where they wear all of this stuff every single day, right? This is a part of them that and as you guys said, that's following that European standard. Rastafarianism was um was stepping out and going against that. You know what I'm saying? It was going against the whole concept of this is how you expect me to look, but this is what I am. You know what I'm saying? Type of deal. So I that made me, after Shannon and Darwin acknowledge it, it made me think about that part as well again. But yeah, I think that it's a completely different scenario and situation.
Gotcha.
So I know you want to wrap this up, Trip. So let me ask you a question. So you were asking about undateable women,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean that's the title of the show. The myth, dismantling the myth of undateable black women. The biggest part that makes a woman undateable for me,
So
because
I have a
everybody's different, as Marcus has explained, is the woman who does not prioritize me. That's what makes a woman undateable for me.
Mm.
The fundamental basics of a woman's purpose not being her main goal in my relationship with her would make me say, oh no, I'm cool. And oftentimes you could determine that quickly, but when you young, and I fell victim to this. You get blinded by that fat ass and sex, and then
It's
and if you
easy. It's
and if I
easy
would have
for that to
paid
happen.
attention, yeah, if I would have paid
We
attention
fall
to the
for it
red
every
flag
time, man.
the first time around, I'd have saved myself a lot of time. But unfortunately, I didn't discover these things until later in my manhood. And so that's one of the reasons why we have King Talk. It's one of the reasons why I like to talk to young men, and I'm attempting to get them to pay attention to these things, older men as well, because if you got a woman who's out there, because to be honest with you, man, there's a lot of relationships out there, marriages, that they're competing against each other. Like the husband and wife is competing against each other. Who got who worked the longest, or who made the most money, who got the biggest paycheck, or who bought this. Or you got people it's not really a a situation where somebody is leading and the other is following. And I think that there's a natural order in relationships. And so I need a woman who's going to prioritize me, man. And like I explain to people all the time, like I tell men, how do you pick a good woman? Did your life get easier as a result of her presence? That's it. It's your life, not the kids, not hers, not everybody else's. Did your life increase as a result of her being in it? And if it didn't, you need to get rid of her. And so today, when all you got to do is let a lot of women talk, man. Just listen to her once or twice. You don't even got to go on a date. Just on the first phone calls, you could hear if you're going to be prioritized in that relationship. Now, I know you may want to hit it, but if you can get some dick discipline and get past that sexual side of it, then you will eliminate a whole lot of women in your life that will drive you up the wall later on. So the undateable ones
you
for
make
me are the ones who fucking who seems to be a little selfish. There's a lot of selfish people out there, and if I determine that a woman is selfish, I'm gone.
you make a great point, Shannon, when you say that you just have to listen sometimes. And the funny thing about it is it's extremely easy for the conversation to go that way. Anybody who I advise at all, I always tell them that you should always do more listening and less talking, because you're just giving out information about yourself that is probably going to work against you. Whereas if you listen, females love to talk anyway. They don't really want to hear from us, really. Like they don't really like us to say very much, right? I don't know how, like, if y'all been in the dating world for long ago or whatever, but most of these women, they just don't want to hear from us. They just want to talk. And a lot of times they don't even want advice. They just want to vent, and they just want to keep telling you about themselves. So when you listen, they're just going to tell themselves, like you said. So it's so easy to do that. Just let them talk. Try not to talk about yourself, because you're going to learn so much more. And females will feel like you have better conversation when you say less, which is crazy. But yeah. Ken, are you ready? Or you want to wait till we come back around?
Yeah,
All
what
right, what did you want to add to it, brother? I know you've been waiting patiently.
no, no, all I gotta say is this, right? All I gotta say is this. Like he said, if you allow them to talk too much, they will tell on themselves. It's also the same thing that he said that women ain't funny, but they want to tell the most corniest joke, right? Uh, so that's life. The reason why I'm saying this is so funny, man. You guys are talking about the ones that want to paint their hair. I have more problem with the one that want to bleach their skins. That's where my problem is. The ones that bleach their skins. Like you got to see a girl in her 20s, she's dark skinned. Then in her 40s, she's white. What is that? I just can't tell, man. Even it cuts across so many levels, from the poor girl in the hood to the celebrity in Hollywood. They all follow the same trend. Dark skin in their 20s and and super light skin in their 40s. I used to think that this was a Nigerian problem, because in Nigeria we have a problem of women bleaching their skin. But this is now universal. It's everywhere. But to me personally, right, I think it's more of a mental health problem. I'm sorry to say this. It's a mental health problem, because when you start becoming insecure about yourself, you got to check into the hospital, man.
So
That's just
So let me ask you this: would you say that it was probably indoctrination that probably motivated them to do that? Maybe something that they were exposed to, modern day beauty standards, what they witness. I know, particularly today, what social media highlights, what the algorithms push. But there's always been that. There's been so many things. I know, at least on this side of the continent, I mean, of the globe, we had light skin, dark skin separated not by our own doing, but by you know who. And we were told that the light skin was better, and they got the better jobs and everything. So it's so for that, when you witness that, right? There's always been a separation. There's always been a faction for, well, even if we're not going to say always, but for a very long time in history, it's always been that where if the lighter you were, the more privileged you were, or the more
That
beautiful you are perceived.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a thing
that
nowadays.
that's not that is not true at all, because you got to look at it this way, right? Pam Grier was not light skinned, and she was popular. She was supermodel. What's her name? Campbell, the UK lady, wasn't even light skinned.
No,
She
Pam Grier
was.
was definitely top tier in the 70s. Kenny.
That's what I'm saying. But she wasn't. But she wasn't. She wasn't. Okay, you're talking to Kenny, because I saw him made his point.
Pam Grier was
I'm not.
light skinned. She was caramel. So she was
She
on the
never
scale
bleached.
where I
Bro.
remember the
She
first
never
time I
bleached.
seen her in coffee.
That's
She
not light
she
skin, bro.
she's
No, she
I,
wasn't. She wasn't light skinned.
she's
Kenny.
caramel. She's not dark skinned. She's
No,
more fair skinned.
no.
That
The reason why I brought Pam Grier is because she never lightened her skin. She kept the skin the way it is. What's her name? Naomi Campbell. The same thing.
Mhm.
Naomi Campbell wasn't even light skinned. She is still dark skinned. All those top models, look at the whole top models, right? They are not big booty women. They are not light skinned women. They are
Well, tell
women
you
that
what.
maintained their color.
Now, when you talk about like the big booties and stuff, right? Those would be our beauty standards versus the European beauty standards, which would be model type shape, the thin, and that's why they were able to, or the bone structure that they like. That's why they were able to be elevated, in my opinion. It wasn't necessarily the tone, the skin shade in those circumstances, but more
But
like the body type. They had
yeah,
more
but
of a European body type. They're all
uh,
very slender. They didn't have the curves that the
it's
black
not.
women have and stuff.
It's not just that, because if you look at people like Pam Grier didn't have flat butt.
Okay.
She had a figure. But what I'm trying to say is that the market respected people that keep their natural look. That's what the market respected. But this is what happened in the 80s, because all these things started mostly in the early 80s. Was those basketball players getting married to the white women? Then the black women said, "Whoa, let me compete." Because you got to understand, the lightening of skin started in the 80s. And it's because of when the mixed race couple thing started in its prime, that it's at its prime, that's when people began to bleach their skin. And even in the 80s, it happened both ways. And then the person that propelled it was Michael Jackson that propelled it. Because remember, Michael Jackson had a fat nose in the early 80s, and then by the dawn of the 90s, the fat nose became skinny nose, pointing out. That changed the whole thing. So Michael Jackson influenced the beauty standard. That's not beauty, because that was not beauty. It influenced the outlook of a lot of black people, both men and women. But at the
hey, but
same time, the women become far more insecure, because they thought that the men were gravitating towards light skinned women. No, the men wanted to befriend light skinned women, but they want to marry dark skinned women because they still want to have dark skinned children. So
were
go
were
ahead.
you in the States or in Africa during the 80s
This
and 90s?
this this I was in Africa. This is global. This is not just in
No,
the US, because you guys see the
that
US
wasn't happening in
aspect.
America, bro. That wasn't happening in America.
What
In the
wasn't happening in America?
as far as in the 90s, from what I can remember,
Uh-huh.
black women were wearing waterfalls. They were wearing somewhat close to their natural hair. If anything,
But that was late
caramel.
70s. That wasn't even now. I know.
No,
Remember, I said at the dawn
that
turn of the 90s, right?
I'm talking about in the 90s in America, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in the 80s, so I don't remember much from the
Yeah.
80s. I'm sure Shannon and Kenny P can speak on this, but
Yeah.
during that time period, from the images that I've seen and being aware and being able to remember what I saw in the 90s in America or even
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, you know what I'm saying? Black women were still embracing them being black, you know what I'm saying? They were
Mm-hmm.
rocking the weaves, but you know what I'm saying, it wasn't to the extreme of what it is now. They were smelling like cocoa butter and all that, you know what I'm saying, that whole shebang. It wasn't that I don't think that it was as much of that European standard that was happening truly in the black community during the 90s.
Well, what
Maybe in
happened was
Africa, I
what
can't
happened.
say
It really. So the '90s was a turnaround time because that's when conscious rap came out. That's when we had Africa Bambaataa. That's KRS-One was big. You know, everybody was rocking. You know, African fucking medallions on their chest in the early '90s. But in
red
the
fish,
'80s,
bluefish.
yeah, in the '80s prior to that though, and so I think maybe you and Akina kind of like crossing paths because you know brothers like me and Kenny remember Jerry curls when
Right,
S curl, you
right.
know, and so there was, and you know, and then being dark skinned wasn't popular. Trust me, I grew up. I was born in '72, so
Right.
you know, I'm 12 years
So
old and I'm
that's
liking
the
girls in the early
Lionel
'80s,
Richie and
and I'm
Smokey
ashy. I'm
Robinson
you
here.
know African booty scratcher and all those kind of. So you know, but so you know, the light skinned brothers was the ones that they wanted at the time, and that's when everybody was bleaching their hair and conking their hair, and girls was you know putting a flat iron on the stove.
Yeah.
But when the 90s came around, where in the era that you speaking of, that's when we had the black conscious rap, and it was, you know, and fight the power and all that kind of stuff came out. And then Spike Lee had dropped his movies and he, you know, and Do the Right Thing and all those kind of, I mean, they were at the late 80s that those came out, but it hit
Right.
in the communities in the 90s, and that's when it flourished until but what they did was whoever shut down the conscious rap, and then they hit us with gangster rap. And then we went to gangster rap, and then Queen Latifah was pushed out, fucking you know, MC Light pushed out, and then came Foxy Brown and Lil Kim in the late 90s. And then after that, we ain't went back since. After the gold and the wigs and the being a slut and just out there doing all that extra talking all that extra sexual stuff, we never went back. And then Beyonce came along and with Destiny's Child and the rest of them and TLC, and then we haven't gone back there. So it was like we was strong black people in the '70s, black exploitation. You know, we got talking about Pam Grier with Foxy Brown and all that kind of stuff way back in the '70s. And then in the '80s, it was this 10-year period that motherfuckers was trying to be white, trying to be bleaching their hair, and we had a thing that was called a finger wave. Women was wearing finger waves, and the pimps was having their hair laid out and throwing lye in their hair, and the niggas had S curls and Jerry curls and all of that. And then we went back in the 90s, and then at the end of the 90s, it went back to this wild ass beauty standard, and it's been like that for the last 20 years.
Man, but Shannon, I don't think I've ever seen a white person with finger waves. I don't think I've ever seen a white person with a Jerry curl.
Tina Marie rocked one, but that was about it.
But you never seen a white person with a Jerry curl?
Rachel Dolezal. There you go.
Who was that?
What was that workout guy? Didn't he have a Jerry curl? Simmons guy.
Richard Simmons.
Richard Simmons. Yeah.
But they were rocking it because we was wearing it though.
It was a trend. I think the dude that used to paint those pictures of the
Bob Ross.
Bob Ross? No, he didn't have a Jerry curl. He had a fro.
That was a natural afro.
Yeah.
He had black people
say he had a fro.
He had an afro. That was real.
It was a natural fro, but once he caught cancer, they put a fake fro on him to keep his image. You know what I'm saying? But again, that was one of those things that we we made that popular. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I can contribute that to white people, because again, I've never seen a white person wear a real life Jerry curl. I've never seen a white person, aside from a Jew, and that got to be a certain type of Jew, that'll rock a fro. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like a lot of those styles that was being worn during the 80s, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I remember seeing the images of Smokey Robinson and James Brown with the, you know what I'm saying, with the digs.
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah, but I don't know if I can really contribute that to them.
Yeah, and you're right, but you got to also take technology into consideration, because all we really had was pressing curls. So the chemicals that we have today, the wigs and the wig process and the weave process making that we have today, we didn't have in the 80s. Girls didn't have that. So all they had was fucking relaxers, cellophanes, and pressing curls. And bone rollers. So we didn't really. I almost want to say, reality is, you're right. You're absolutely right. But is it because they didn't want to, or is it because they couldn't, because there was no options? And with the options that they have today, what did people choose? I guess that's the argument. So it's a matter of, if they would have had the option to wear, right now they got the extra swirls on their forehead, and they got hair that it's sticking to their head. You can't tell the difference. They got a split going down. They got the part going down. They didn't have that. That wasn't that was not available in 85. So in 85, if that was available, would they have taken it? And that's the question. But go ahead, Trev. You got it, big dog.